today's lesson, we're going to get deep into one single topic: the evolution of vinyl. Originally called gramophone records and then called phonograph records, the term vinyl didn't actually come into regular use until the 1950s. This form of musical playback was actually begun in 1857 with the phonograph machine. It was the same concept, but it was basically used for transcribing words to something that could be interpreted visually. About 20 years later, Thomas Edison invented the first phonograph, and while it bears very little resemblance to the modern idea of the player, it was where the term phonograph begins to be used. In about 1889, Emil Berliner begins selling lateral cut discs, and this is where the term gramophone came to be. It was simply used as a way to differentiate his system from that of Edison's. At this point, discs were only 5 or 7 inches in diameter, and they were really nothing more than novelty in use. Then around the turn of the century, you get 10-inch discs, you get 12-inch discs, and people start to look at them for entertainment purposes. It's also around this point where people start working with different materials to make the discs more durable. You have early versions that were made from rubber or shellac or a number of other unique compounds, and in a lot of ways, each company had their own special formula. During the 1920s, records really began to pick up, and that's when 78 revolutions per minute, or RPM, became the standard. Almost all of these early records were created with an entirely acoustic recording process. Basically, the sound was played or sung into a horn, and that would vibrate a cutting stylus. It was due to this that a lot of the sound was very inconsistent, and it makes it very easy in modern times to pick out a recording from that era. This all changed in about 1925 when a handful of different companies started finding ways to use electric microphones to do the recording process. This enabled them to have greater sonic quality, and it was in 1925 when the Victor company introduced the Victrola. You can easily argue that this stands as the most important turning point in popular music. Using vinyl for records was introduced in about 1931, and by the end of the decade, it was the industry standard. During the 1930s, most records were coming out on 12-inch discs, where in Europe you saw a lot of 8-inch discs. But the problem was, with the current recording process, it only provided a few minutes per side, and many performers had to release massive sets just to cover the songs they wanted to record. This persisted until 1948, when you see the introduction of the LP, or long play record format. And while there had been a number of experiments in the preceding decade, it was when they started playing them at 33 1/3 revolutions per minute that the magic happened. Around the same time, you have the development of the 7-inch 45 record, and this would become the most popular format for singles until the cassette. In the decades since, there have been massive inroads in the recording process and the materials used to make records, but the actual idea and style remains almost exactly like it was nearly a century ago. So that's a basic overview of how vinyl came to be, but be sure to tune in tomorrow to gain more of an understanding on how the modern resurgence in buying vinyl has gone tragically astray.